Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We have a blockbuster preview and prediction video to get into, and it is Coco Gauff versus Maria Sakkari for the round 3 matchup at Indian Wells, and it's actually 5-3 in favor of Maria Sakkari in the head-to-head, and she did beat Coco at Indian Wells last year at the semi-final stage. Before we do get into it though, remember that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on podcast platform. Also, remember to hit that bell notification so you get alerted to all new uploads on YouTube. Thanks very much, guys. Let's get into it. Okay, so the head-to-head is 5-3 as I mentioned, and 4-2 on hard courts, so outdoor hard courts that is. They split the remaining matches 1-1 on clay. Indian Wells for Maria Sakkari has been a really fruitful venue for the Greek player. She's actually made the final 2 out of the last 3 years, and now she goes into this tournament trying to capture some more form, as well as the last few years have been quite turbulent for her. But when she's come to Indian Wells, more often than not, she's managed to rekindle some of that form, some of her career best form, in all honesty, out of this tournament. So I think she clearly has good memories here, which is a big plus. So that definitely helps her, I think, and she clearly likes the environment and the crowds, but also the conditions seem to suit her. The dry conditions, she's a supreme athlete, so she doesn't tend to have issues with endurance, with conditioning, and that really does play a big part in Indian Wells, or at Indian Wells. It's a very physical tournament. It does take a lot out of you. On top of that, the higher bouncing, heavier conditions with, almost clay court-like conditions at times, I think really do suit Sakkari's game. It gives her time to tee up her ground strokes, and we know that she's a very clean striker of a tennis ball. She isn't the biggest hitter, but she hits the ball with a lot of topspin, and she does get a lot of purchase through the court, especially through these courts that are very conducive to topspin. It means that she's able to hit a very heavy ball, and that gives her a great advantage over a lot of players. It also means that she's able to hit fantastic angles, which again is a big plus. For Coco, she's very versatile, as we know, on every single surface, really. But what I would say is that the heaviness of the conditions has seemed to have caused a problem on the forehand, and I don't know whether it's because the courts are slightly quicker than last year. I know they've put down a new surface, but the conditions are still not particularly quick. So it's a bit of a worry that the forehand has faltered in the last couple of matches, or the last match even against Uchijima, where she really stuttered to the finish line there. And she was a break-up in the deciding set, got broken back serving for it. Double faults also leaking in as well, and eventually won in a tiebreaker. So if you want to talk about double faults, by the way, 21 double faults for Coco Gauff over 3 sets. That is an insane amount of double faults, only the 4 aces, so that is not ideal. Clearly struggling with the serve and also the forehand, and those are issues that we've seen in the past. There were a lot of thoughts that she'd figured out, especially the forehand, when she brought in Brad Gilbert, but he did seem to solve it, and then it broke down again towards the back end of his tenure as coach, and now she's got a new coach. It seemed to have been worked out at the beginning of this year again, but now it's come back. So this is clearly an ongoing issue. There's definitely a confidence factor here as well, but I do wonder whether there's something technical that needs to be tweaked a little bit, potentially. On the second serve as well, I'm not sure, but it could be getting tense. Anyone that plays tennis knows that if you're tense when serving, it is very tough to find control. And yeah, she does seem to be quite distressed at times, and I think once she starts hitting a few double faults, it can quite easily unravel for her, unfortunately. So going into this, you would normally, in my books, I would go towards Coco and say I think she's going to get the win, despite the head-to-head being 5-3 in favour of Sakkari. But given the conditions, given the form, I think it's a real... You could argue it's actually not a 50-50, but maybe a 60-40 in favour of Sakkari, which is pretty crazy to say given the rankings, given how Coco is playing the last couple of years, and given how Sakkari is playing the last couple of years. But this tournament really does bring the best out of the Greek star. In terms of tactically what might happen, I think Sakkari is going to target the forehand. We know that. She's going to go big with her own forehand, which has high RPM on it. She hits a good depth and can find good angles on it and really penetrate through the court. She'll try and find those errors on the Gauff forehand, which she did in the semi-final last year and ended up winning in 3 sets. And also she had a pretty solid serving day, Sakkari, as well. Gauff was just really struggling to hurt her from the back of the court. It's tough on these slower courts and heavier courts to hit through the court and hit a lot of winners. Sakkari is a very good defender. She's one of the best movers on tour as well. And I think Gauff on the forehand, if she's not being able to play aggressively off the forehand and hit through and hit winners off that side, it leaves the backhand, which is very reliable, but it's not an aggressive weapon that can really kind of blaze through the court consistently to get her those types of forced errors or winners that she'd like. And if the serve's not working, then it becomes even more difficult. So for Sakkari, she's definitely going to try and exploit the forehand to forehand exchange. Backhand to backhand, she can hold her own, but she'll try and get out of that as much as possible. And then what I also saw was potentially Sakkari trying to play the drop shot. That's probably not the best choice against Gauff, who is arguably, if I'd say aside from maybe Swiatek, the quickest player on tour. And one thing I will say is that actually for Coco, if I was her, I would come to net a lot. Because that seems to be the best option for her. With the forehand faltering and the backhand not being, the weapon that maybe it would be as on a faster hard court, I think it leaves her with either grinding from the back, but then there's going to be worries over the forehand. So why not come to net? She's got great hands, we know that, and try and shorten the points in that way. That's what I would do if I was Coco and her coach. If I was Sakkari, I would say let's try and get it into those grinding points. And we think that shot tolerance-wise, we're going to have a better chance of winning those points. And let's stretch it out, let's make it physical. On the serve return dynamic, obviously, Coco, the second serves, let's see, keep an eye on those. For Sakkari, I think she just needs to apply pressure on the Coco serve. If she can make a lot of returns in, it then puts pressure on Coco to go for more on the first serve, and then in turn puts more pressure on her making a second serve, and that could then lead to double faults. So it's interesting how the returning from your opponent can really have an effect on your perception of how you think you should be serving, right? It does have an effect. For Sakkari, I think we know that she's going to mainly go into the forehand return of Coco, at least initially, and then she'll try and be aggressive on the +1 shot, especially with the forehand, off anything short. And she did that really well in the semi-final last year. So my prediction is actually going to be Sakkari to get it done again, but in 3 sets again this year. I just have a feeling that she clearly loves being at this tournament. Coco, I'm not convinced by right now, and Sakkari is playing some good tennis. So I just think it's going to be a case of the stars aligning for Sakkari yet again. Let me know in the comment section below what you think and why. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you in the next video.